What's up, my blood brothers of battle, my sworn sisters of slaying, my inside gamers of glory? I'm your new boy, Evan Campbell, and it's the weekend, and I know what you're thinking. It's a new guy. He's gonna be terrible. Yeah, I'm pretty terrible. Anyways, March Madness is upon us, and I don't mean the boring one. Yes, an onslaught of new games is finally coming, and among them is a sequel to one of the best Metroidvanias of all time. Of course, I'm talking about Ori and the Will of the Wisps, which is the follow-up to Moon Studios' acclaimed masterpiece, Ori and the Blind Forest. And it's set to release in a couple of days on March 11th. So in preparation for what might be one of the best games on an Xbox One this year, I wanted to dive into what made the first Ori game so great. I want to catch you up on the narrative and take a look at all the cool new stuff to expect in Will of the Wisps. Now, fair warning, I'm sounding the spoiler horn, so if you're frantically trying to get through the first Ori or don't want to be spoiled about anything you might discover or unlock in the second one, then flee now and come back and watch this video when you're ready. You've been warned. Sound the horn. Alright, so before we jump into what's new with Will of the Wisps, let's take a look at what made the first Ori so dang special. For starters, if you've never played Ori and the Blind Forest, it's a 2D side-scrolling action platformer with a map and progression system that all fit well within the Metroidvania descriptor. Now, I know some of you don't like that term because it's obtuse or it's inaccurate. Some games are more Castlevania, most games are more Metroid, but look, it's an easy way to describe and categorize a thing without having to publish a thesis. Breaking down genres and how they're becoming increasingly ineffective at categorizing modern games is a topic for another video. So if you think you got the perfect system for categorizing and quickly describing games, stop crying. Blow up my DMs and we'll hash it out. Moving on. Now, before Ori could go on to be considered to be a great game by anyone, it first had to prove its worthiness and set itself apart from a sea, or a forest, if you will, of other Metroidvania-style games. In fact, when Ori was released in March of 2015, Axiom Verge, another well-received Metroidvania, came out about 2 weeks later, and people tended to either be for one game or the other. However, what immediately sets Ori apart from other Metroidvanias and even other great games in general is its striking and overwhelming visual style. Sure, a handful of other games like Dust and Fee have similar looks or inspirations, but Ori stands alone in its execution. Light filters through trees, rocks, and water, bouncing around the environments, setting the stage for a whimsical, heartfelt adventure. The look is reminiscent of many of the magical places you might have seen in a Miyazaki film like Totoro or Princess Mononoke, and it's just quite stunning. The sense of presence and depth is further heightened by an exquisite use of foreground and background elements. Ori can be hidden by natural surroundings as they move through the forest, and creatures can be seen fluidly creeping around the foreground as they move to the background, or even jump into your playfield to confront you as an enemy or a boss. The other thing that immediately hits you when you pick up Ori for the first time is the epic swelling of orchestral music accompanied by catchy piano themes and choral singing. Ori's audio design undeniably matches its aesthetic and effectively communicates the stakes of the world you're playing in. The decaying forest almost tells an entire story through the game's sounds, feeling both alive with wonderment, but also sad, while melancholy tones remind you of Ori's loss and the struggle to bring life back to a dying forest. Another thing Ori and the Blind Forest accomplishes that few games do is a really well-balanced blend between solid platforming controls and super detailed animations. You know, the kind that don't get in the way when you're doing that really hard part of a game for like the 50th time. For me, there's kind of two ends of the spectrum when it comes to platformers. There's the incredibly pinpoint accurate inputs of a game like Super Meat Boy or Celeste, and then there's something like the floaty jumps of the first Little Big Planet. Let's not talk about it. Now, one of the big criticisms of the first Ori game is how the combat is a little grindy at first and pretty mashy throughout. Doesn't really change that much based on the enemies you're fighting. You kind of just mash the attack button and you chew through enemies that way. It's a fair criticism. That said, I think it was cool how they approached combat in a debut game for the studio. You attack from a distance with a little wisp called Design, and it feels pretty good, especially as you upgrade damage and range. It's just not all that varied, so it's a lot of the same, but it's still a really fun game to play and run around in. The big mechanical separation from Ori and other Metroidvanias is its emphasis on difficult platforming, which hadn't really been seen before, at least not the combination of exploration and platforming in this way. For the new kids on the block, think of it as someone took sections of Celeste and put them into like a Hollow Knight map, or, you know, if you want an older example, it's like taking Super Meat Boy levels and hiding them in like a Metroid or Castlevania game. And it's really cool the way it does it. To kind of take the edge off try and die, that difficult platforming, Ori has an ability called Soul Link, which allows you to set down a quick save point almost anywhere in a given environment, except for like somewhere where you would just like spawn and die. But when you die, you're zipped back to that checkpoint. If you have enough spirit energy and you clear the difficult part you're working on, you can just set the checkpoint down again, so you can kind of take a breath. It's also upgradable, so it's a pretty cool feature that quickly lets you retry difficult spots in the level or explore new areas for secrets without having to worry about dying and being sent all the way back to a save point. I expect this feature will return in Ori 2 in some way. I may have understated it before, but let me just reiterate, the mechanics in this game feel great, and mastering difficult sections of the map is just really a lot of fun. There's bounce and dash mechanics where you're actually like bouncing off of or bouncing through different objects in the environment to get to higher ledges or get across chasms and things. And it's just really cool the way it flows because it kind of slows down time, and then you dash through, and then you can do it again and again, and you chain it together. It's really cool. The last thing I want to highlight before we jump into Will-O-Wisp is the story of Ori and the Blind Forest. For one, the narrative delivery in Blind Forest is another kind of a benchmark that sets the game apart from just other games in general. The story is told non-sequentially, and in spite of characters never speaking, they maintain a really complex nature with relatable motivations, especially the game's antagonists and villains. Secondly, when we go through the story, we can also kind of glean where Will-O-Wisp might pick up and, you know, what characters we might see. So when you go to play that game, if you're watching this video, you'll be prepared even if you didn't play the first game. So first off, let me just say, I didn't cry during the first 10 minutes of Blind Forest. I absolutely didn't cry during the ending, and I especially didn't cry when I was trying to 100% the first version of the game and then got locked out of the area that final collectible was in. Shut up, I'm not crying, you're crying. So the tale of Ori begins when a giant storm blows Ori off of the Great Spirit Tree and into the forest. Ori is found and adopted by a forest critter called Naru, who raises Ori as her own. The Spirit Tree sends out a burst of light to call out and find Ori, but as Naru is a creature of darkness, she fears the light could hurt her and her newly adopted child, so she takes Ori to hide in their home, which is a cave with a cache of fruits. But the forest begins to wither and die. Naru and Ori soon run out of food, and Naru is lost to hunger after giving the last fruit to Ori. Heavy stuff. Ori is devastated, and after mourning the lost parent, Ori leaves home, but eventually, exhausted, Ori also collapses and dies. However, the Spirit Tree, sensing Ori's last breath nearby, makes a connection and uses the last of its energy to revive Ori, and this is kind of where the bulk of the game begins. Ori wakes up and eventually finds a mysterious light being called Sign, who is the eyes and light of the Spirit Tree. Sign explains that the reason the forest began to die was because Kuro, a great dark owl, attacked the Spirit Tree and removed Sign, blinding the forest and causing the onset of decay. It's up to Ori and Sign to return the balance by restoring the 3 elements of light located in 3 different areas of the map. The element of water is located in the Ginso Tree, the element of winds in the depths of the Forlorn Ruins, and the element of warmth hidden in the heart of Mount Horu. Ori must restore these elements by finding fellow fallen spirit guardians to unlock new abilities and access different parts of the forest where the elements are located. Anyways, it turns out that when the Spirit Tree sent out its burst of light, Kuro's babies, also creatures of darkness, were killed by the intense light, sending Kuro on a rage, ultimately dooming the entire forest as we already know. There's a lot of like young creatures dying in this game. It's effective, it works, it's sad, I don't know. I didn't cry. Just making that clear for the 3rd time. Ori ventures on, encountering and helping a creature called Gumo, who is part of a lost race that seemed in charge of protecting or maintaining the wind element. However, when Ori and Sign and Gumo, who is secretly following them, reach the Forlorn Ruins, where all the other Gumen live, we discover that the imbalance of the forest also took the lives of all the other Gumen, and Gumo is likely the last of his kind. Ori and Sign plan to restore the ruins to honor the fallen Gumen, and the sentiment seems to inspire Gumo. This is notable because Gumo repays Ori's efforts by taking a light orb he stole from the water element area to Ori's home, actually resurrecting Naru, like Ori's mom, basically. Who then sets out to find Ori. After restoring the element of winds in the Forlorn Ruins, Ori and Sign discover Kuro's nest, and there's an unhatched egg inside. A lot of different things going on at once. The narrative is strongly put together. By the time Ori completes the mountain trials and restores the warmth element, Kuro is a present danger, hunting down any creatures resembling the Spirit Tree's light. To make things worse, the volcano where the fire element resides is erupting due to your efforts and causing portions of the forest to catch fire. The fire puts everyone in danger, including Naru and Kuro's last remaining egg. There's one final sprint at the end of the game as you make your way through the burning forest. It's like this timed sequence where there's like lava and you're running out, and Kuro's also trying to attack you, and it's pretty epic, but ultimately Kuro catches Ori. She knocks Ori unconscious and grabs Sign in her talons. However, just before Kuro's fatal blow, Naru arrives. Kuro sees the exchange and realizes that she is taking the life of loved ones in the same way the Spirit Tree took the lives of her children. There's also an element in play here where Naru and Ori are creatures of light and dark, but also mother and child. Realizing her faults and the devastation she caused, Kuro takes Sign back to the Spirit Tree in a sacrifice that allows both Ori and Kuro's egg to live. The Spirit Tree quickly returns balance to the forest. Some time passes and Ori looks on as new spirit guardians are born from the light. We see Gumo and Naru are left to care for Kuro's unborn chick, which begins to hatch at the very last moment of the game. All in all, it's pretty heavy stuff for a 2D platformer, and Moon Studios handles the subject matter with extreme care and masterful strokes of sight and sound. In the definitive edition released a year later, 2 new areas were added to the game. One is the Blackroot Burrows, which explores the backstory of Naru and her home growing up, and the other is is called the Lost Grove, which is kind of like a hidden beach area. It also added 2 new abilities, Dash, which does exactly what it sounds like. You can dash forward and dash in the air, and Light Burst, which is kind of like a light grenade, and it's used to solve a lot of puzzles and things in the new areas. There's a lot of quality of life things also in Definitive Edition, like fast travel and difficulty settings, which are really cool. There's some really cool extra stuff like concept art and videos of like pre-alpha game builds and stuff. That stuff's great. The Definitive Edition overall is really sound, and it's actually kind of hard to imagine the game without the other 2 abilities in there. But for the most part, the backstory of Noru probably won't play much into the Will-O-The-Wisp. The E3 2019 gameplay trailer had a really cool moment where Ori was riding on the back of what we can assume is the late Kuro's baby owl. It's a really fun reveal, so we can imagine there's probably a section or sections of the new game where you interact with Kuro's baby. Based on everything we've seen so far, looks like Moon Studios is swinging even harder for the fences with Ori and Will-O-The-Wisp. You can imagine the game will be packed with the same level of attention to detail and care when it comes to art direction and sound design. It also looks like they have taken to heart some of the criticism of the first game and are improving those elements of the sequel, citing Diablo as an inspiration for their new combat progression. Ori now has 3 slots for active abilities in Will-O-The-Wisp. There are weapon slots and ability slots, so you can kind of slot in different things in there. In the trailer, I think we see a bow, but there's also a sword, a hammer, a new spirit bomb type of thing, and healing ability. We can also see some really cool looking bosses and encounters that could potentially rival some of the best Kuro moments from Ori and the Blind Forest. The giant spider here in this trailer, probably the most notable, but there's also what looks like a wolf and a fire-breathing grub, which seem really cool. If the solemnness of the first game had you down a little, you might be excited to learn that Ori 2 has NPC characters with actual dialogue and side quests, which doesn't seem like a novel thing, but if you played through the first game, you kind of know what I mean. It's really kind of isolated. It looks like traversal is also getting an update with a whip or grappling hook ability that's been shown in some recent gameplay videos. There's also a burrowing ability that has you diving and jumping through the sand like a dolphin, which could also be used as an attack. That seemed really cool. Upgrading and level-based progression is also back, but now with multiple weapons and abilities. It seems like there will be a variety of ways to alter the way a bow or a sword works. For example, adding multiple projectiles to a single bow shot. Moon Studios is also adding a shard system that will allow you to do things like add a compass that guides you to your objectives, add a triple jump, or do things like improve your attack damage, but at the expense of having less HP. One last cool thing worth mentioning is the creator of famed Metroid 2 fan project AM2R was hired on at Moon Studios to work on Ori 2. I think it's safe to say if anyone knows a thing or two about Metroidvanias, it's Milton Dr. M64 Gausti. AM2R ripped, and that's why Nintendo shut it down. You better believe it. Well, I hope that was informative for those of you who haven't played an Ori game yet, and a nice refresher for those getting ready to dive back in with Will-O-The-Wisp. If you're really excited and can't wait for March 11th, Ori and the Blind Forest Definitive Edition is out now on Switch, and I would argue even after watching this video and spoiling all the narrative stuff, the game still holds up incredibly well, and it is absolutely worth playing. For everyone else, I guess we just sit here and watch as the wind gently makes these trees sway back and forth while listening to the Ori soundtrack. Wait, no, actually, you could go listen to the sweet new Inside Gaming podcast. Leave me comments, I guess. See ya.
However, you don't have to get into the creation side of things to enjoy your time with Dreams. There is an endless amount of user-generated levels that will keep you occupied for a while. And I, being the nice person I am, dug through the trenches and found some real gems here that I'd like to share with you all today. But before we get into all the strange brainchilds I discovered, I just want to say that I'm a huge fan of user-generated content for games.